In 1920, the German police received a phone call that a woman in her 20s jumped off a bridge in Berlin. Luckily, this was a small bridge. She survived from the jump and only received a couple of minor bruises. Still, she was rushed to the hospital for treatment. The woman was quite odd. She speaks in German with a thick Russian accent. She had scars all over her body, but they were not sure whether this was self-inflicted or somebody did it to her. She acted very weird. When asked what her name is, she couldn't answer. With the strange accent she had and the refusal to reveal her identity, they realized that she may be a Russian spy living in Germany or suffered from severe memory loss. The nurses did not have any legal paper to indicate what her name is, and so they just called her Miss Unknown. While in the hospital, a fellow patient who goes by the name Clara, a German who had lived in Russia, noticed that the woman strikes a huge resemblance to the youngest daughter of the Russian royal family, Grand Duchess Anastasia. Nicholas II, the father of the family, Alexandra, the mother, and their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei. The family mostly reside in a palace in St. Petersburg. However, due to the political tension during 1918, the family stayed in a compound at a remote area in Yekaterinburg. On the night of July 17, 1918, was when the infamous incident happened. The whole family were killed by a firing squad, including 4 others who served for the family: Eugene Botkin, the family doctor; Anna Demidova, the chambermaid; Alexei Trump, the head footman; and Ivan Katarinov, the head cook. In 1919, the military began a search effort to look for the unmarked graves of the family. Investigators found charred bones in a pit just 9 miles of Yekaterinburg. They concluded that their bodies were cremated since there were evidence of fire. DNA analysis was not available back then to have a conclusive scientific evidence, so this alone was enough proof of what happened to the family. They assumed all members were killed and no survivors. The young princess name also contributed the mystery of this whole thing. Anastasia originates in Greek language and means resurrection. Now, this sounds a bit far-fetched, and it could just be a coincidence. In the hospital, she was visited by 3 people: Nicholas von Schwabe, Zinaida Tolstoy, and Sophie Boxhoveden. Nicholas von Schwabe was a former personal guard of Anastasia's grandmother. He showed the woman numerous old family portraits, which she then pointed at the youngest daughter and said that she was the one in the picture. Zinaida Tolstoy, a close friend of Alexandra, who knew Anastasia since she was young, immediately recognized the young princess. She was quite positive that it was the same person. On the other hand, Sophie, the personal assistant of Alexandra, was not convinced by this and said that the woman was too short to be Anastasia. Now, more relatives and friends of the family also came by to pay a visit. Alexei Volkov, another personal assistant of the family; Pierre Gilliard, Anastasia's tutor; Shura, the nursemaid; and Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna, the younger sister of Nicholas II, who shared the same name as the eldest daughter. All 4 denied that the woman was the young princess, while they agreed that she resembles much like Anastasia. The huge giveaway was the lack of knowledge of Russian, English, and French. They found it quite odd that she forgot these 3 languages, especially Russian, which was her mother tongue. A childhood friend, Tatiana Botkin, who also was the daughter of the family doctor, defended that the woman was indeed Anastasia, and she may have likely suffered from a mental illness which caused her to forget all these things. While there were still doubts of her identity, some that believed that this woman was actually Anastasia. In 1925, her health started to deteriorate. She developed tuberculosis and was in need for extensive treatment. Prince Valdemar of Denmark, Anastasia's great-uncle, who also was unsure whether she really was the real princess, decided to help. So he flew her to Switzerland to admit her to a better hospital and covered all the medical bills. Alexandra's brother, Ernest Lewis, wasn't buying that the woman was her niece, and so he hired a private investigator to look into the mysterious woman. It was revealed that her real name is Franziska Szczęskowska, and she was born in Poland in 1896. She had worked at a munition factory and suffered from depression after her husband was killed in the war. On top of that, to make matters worse, she got into a scary accident at work. A grenade fell out of her hand, but was lucky enough to stay out of distance before it exploded. No serious physical injury, but she suffered from a minor concussion. Unable to work, she had fallen on hard times and was then sent to a mental hospital for treatment. The private investigator also found out that before the incident in 1920, when she jumped off a bridge, she already went through 2 mental hospitals, but somehow escaped from both. On how exactly she managed to escape is still unknown, but ever since then, her family lost contact with her and was not heard from again. In 1927, Felix, her supposed brother, came by to visit. At first glance, he was positive that she was his sister. They talked and noticed the same speech pattern she makes all the time. But when he was about to sign an official document to declare that she is indeed Franziska, not the young princess, he backed down and only wrote down that the woman showed similar resemblance of his missing sister. Gleb Botkin, another childhood friend of Anastasia, and also the son of the family doctor, confirmed that the woman was the real Anastasia. She even revealed to him how she managed to survive and escape from the execution. She told him that none of her vital organs were hit and were left unconscious. She was then thrown on the back of a truck along with the rest of the bodies and decided to play dead. When the truck stopped, she bolted into the woods in the middle of the night, and luckily, she encountered a guard who helped her get to safety. Glenn took this story and published several articles to support her claim, and as expected, this caught a lot of attention. Now here is where things got a lot messier. There were supporters that believed the woman was actually the young Grand Duchess Anastasia. The media circus had gotten so big that she had to use the name Anna Anderson when booking a hotel to keep her anonymous. Gleb Botkin hired a lawyer, Edwards Follows, and their objective was to take it to court and legally recognize her as the Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov. They want to make this official, and if they were to win this case, the woman would be able to obtain any estate property owned by the royal family outside the Soviet Union. Botkins and Follows were heavily criticized by the relative of the royal family. They accused them of defrauding the inheritance and using the innocent woman for monetary gain. The lawyer based their case on the comparable facial features between Anna and Anastasia. They provided a collection of photos side by side, mainly focusing on their ear structure. Apart from the pictures, they also did physical examination to check for any matching birthmarks and notable scars. Experts even tried to compare the handwritings to see any similarities. At the end, all of these were analyzed and found to be quite identical. However, the big problem was her inability to speak Russian. Everything seems to add up just except for that. While the long case was ongoing, a woman who was not related to the royal family, Annie Jennings, offered her housing at her huge estate in New York City. While staying here, she didn't have much privacy. Whenever she goes out, there are reporters continually asking whether she was actually Anastasia or just a mere imposter. Every time she was asked about her identity, she got angry and occasionally lashed out. It was clear her stay in the city wasn't for her. There was one event where she was caught walking alone on the rooftop in the middle of the night. Then after that, a series of wild behavior began. She started throwing tantrums, shouting at random people, and sometimes even looking for a fight. But there are days when she just locked herself in her room for hours, refusing to talk to anybody. Eventually, in 1930, the judge signed an order committing her to a mental hospital. Back in Germany, she had a final meeting with her family in 1938. Her parents and siblings were sure she was Franziska, but she denied knowing them. Just like the first encounter with her brother, Felix, the family refused to sign because if they did that, she would be sent to prison. In 1967, the court came to a decision that there was not enough evidence to prove that she is actually the young princess. However, despite the verdict, She continues to claim to be the youngest daughter of Russian royal family. From here, she moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, got married, and lived there until her death in 1984. In a later report, Felix stated that he knew it was his sister when he saw her back in 1927, but decided to keep quiet because at that time he thought she was in a better position. People provided her housing and even paid her medical bills. He stated that, had it not been for those treatments she received, she probably would have died much younger. In 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, many searched the bodies of the royal family. They found their skeletal remains in a mass grave near Yekaterinburg. DNA analysis identified that all family members and servants were discovered except Anastasia and the youngest child, Alexei. This discovery reignited the identity of the woman who claimed to be Anastasia back in 1920, but this was quickly dismissed in 2007 when a Russian archaeologist discovered the remains of the other two. With this, there is now conclusive evidence that Anastasia is now deceased, and all the people who claim to be the young Grand Duchess were just imposters. Even with the case solved, one would question, did Franziska really believe that she was the Grand Duchess Anastasia? Or was this a careful plan to swindle the royal family inheritance? Nobody exactly knew what was going on in Franziska's head, but most historians agreed that Franziska suffered from a mental illness which convinced her to be somebody else.